What if I told you that an ancient prophet witnessed an apocalypse so terrifying that he commanded it to be passed down through every generation forever? What if I told you that an ancient prophet witnessed an apocalypse so terrifying that he commanded it to be passed down through every generation forever? Joel saw something that made drunk men weep, priests wail through the night, and the very ground itself mourn. But here's what's chilling. Scholars can't even agree on when this happened. No dates, no kings mentioned, just pure, raw prophecy suspended in time. This isn't your typical Bible story. Joel describes an army so devastating that it turns paradise into a wasteland in hours. An invasion where soldiers scale walls like spiders, march without breaking formation, and nothing, absolutely nothing, stops their advance. The sky goes black, mountains tremble, and God himself roars from Jerusalem. But then, just when all hope seems lost, Joel reveals something that will echo through millennia, a promise so radical it will change Christianity forever. An outpouring that breaks every social barrier, a fountain flowing from God's temple that transforms desolation into abundance. Tonight, you'll discover why this mysterious book holds keys to understanding both ancient catastrophe and future hope. Prepare to see Joel as you've never seen before. The word of the Lord came to Joel, son of Pethuel. That's how it all began. Simple, direct, unexpected. Joel wasn't asking for this message. He wasn't prepared for what God was about to show him. But when the Lord speaks, a prophet listens, and what Joel heard would shake an entire nation to its core. In the opening verse of chapter 1, Joel receives his commission, and immediately in verse 2, he understands the weight of what he must do. He calls out to the elders, to every single person living in the land. Hear this, you elders. Give ear, all inhabitants of the land. Has such a thing happened in your days, or in the days of your fathers? It's a haunting question. Joel isn't talking about something ordinary. He's pointing to an event so catastrophic, so unprecedented, that nobody alive has seen anything like it. Not the elders with their decades of experience and weathered wisdom. Not their fathers who lived through wars and famines. Not even their grandfathers in the stories passed down through generations around evening fires. This is something new, something terrible. Something that will redefine what disaster means for this generation and every generation that follows. Then comes verse 3, and Joel makes a demand that echoes through time. Tell your children of it, and let your children tell their children and their children to another generation. This wasn't meant to be forgotten. Whatever was coming, whatever Joel was about to describe, it had to be remembered. Parents would tell their children. Those children would grow up and tell their own children, and on, through the generations, this story would live. Why? Because some events are too important to let fade into history. Some moments define a people so completely that forgetting them would mean losing a crucial part of their identity. Joel knew this wasn't just a bad harvest or a difficult season. This was something that would mark them forever, a scar on the collective memory of an entire nation. The command is specific. Tell it forward. Don't let it die with you. Make sure the next generation knows. Make sure they understand what happened here, because if they forget, they'll be unprepared when something similar comes again. Memory becomes survival. Story becomes warning. Then Joel describes what's coming, and the image is terrifying in its simplicity. Verse 4 hits like a hammer. What the cutting locust left, the swarming locust has eaten. What the swarming locust left, the hopping locust has eaten. And what the hopping locust left, the destroying locust has eaten. 4 types of locusts, 4 waves of destruction, each one finishing what the last one started. Imagine standing in a field, watching the first swarm descend from the horizon like a dark cloud. They cover everything. The sky darkens with their bodies. The air fills with the sound of millions of wings beating in terrible synchronization. They eat and eat until there's almost nothing left. You think maybe, just maybe, something will survive. Then the second wave arrives. They find what the first missed, the small shoots that escaped notice, the hidden patches that survived the initial assault. Then the third wave comes, more thorough than the previous two. Then the fourth wave descends, and they finish the job with ruthless efficiency. It's complete, it's systematic, it's total devastation. Joel isn't using metaphors here. He's describing an actual locust plague, something the ancient world feared more than almost anything else. Locusts could appear suddenly, in numbers so vast they blocked out the sun. They could strip an entire region of every green thing in a matter of hours. Crops, trees, grass, everything edible disappeared into their mouths. A single swarm could contain billions of insects, each one eating its body weight in vegetation every single day. But the way Joel describes it suggests something more than just a natural disaster. 4 specific types, coming in succession, each with their own name and their own role in the destruction. The cutting locust, the swarming locust, the hopping locust, the destroying locust. It reads like a military campaign, each battalion assigned its target, each unit executing its orders with precision. The cutting locusts come first, slicing through the crops like knives. Then the swarming locusts arrive in massive formations, covering everything that remains. The hopping locusts follow, bouncing from plant to plant, finishing what the swarm has missed. Finally, the destroying locusts sweep through, eliminating any last trace of green. The land doesn't stand a chance. What survives the first assault falls to the second. What escapes the second dies under the third. By the time the fourth wave finishes its work, there's nothing left. Just bare earth and stripped branches, and the sound of millions of wings moving on to the next target. Joel turns his attention to a specific group of people in verse 5. Awake, you drunkards, and weep and wail, all you drinkers of wine, because of the sweet wine, for it is cut off from your mouth. This is personal now. Joel calls out those who lived for pleasure, who spent their days drinking and their nights in celebration. He tells them to wake up from their drunken stupor and face reality. The party is over, the wine is gone, and it's not coming back. Why focus on drunkards? Because when disaster strikes, those who lived in denial feel it most sharply. These were people who numbed themselves to the world around them, who chose intoxication over awareness. They ignored the warnings. They laughed off concerns about the future. They believed tomorrow would always be like today, full of wine and celebration. Now they have no choice but to be sober, and what they see when the fog clears is devastating. The sweet wine has been cut off from their mouths, not postponed, not delayed, not running low, cut off completely. The grapes are gone, the vines are destroyed. There will be no harvest this year, no wine next season, no vintage to look forward to. The thing they loved most, the thing they built their entire lives around, has been taken away in an instant. Joel commands them to weep and wail. These aren't gentle tears of disappointment. This is the kind of grief that comes from losing everything. The Hebrew word suggests loud lamentation, public displays of anguish, the kind of mourning that can't be hidden or contained. The drunkards, who probably mocked the warnings and laughed at concerns about locusts, now have to confront the consequences of their choices in the harshest possible way. Their source of escape has vanished, and they're left facing a reality they're completely unprepared to handle. No more wine to dull the pain, no more celebrations to distract from responsibility, just empty cups and the bitter taste of regret. In verse 6, Joel reveals something that makes the situation even more terrifying. For a nation has come up against my land, powerful and beyond number. Its teeth are lion's teeth, and it has the fangs of a lioness. Wait, a nation? Joel was just talking about locusts. Now he's talking about an invasion. This is where the book of Joel becomes truly mysterious and layered. Are these actual insects or a foreign army? The answer seems to be both. Joel sees the locusts and describes them as an invading force, a military power that has attacked God's land with strategic precision. The description is chilling. This nation is powerful beyond measure and impossible to count. You can't negotiate with them. You can't reason with them. You can't bribe them or appeal to their mercy. They have no king to bargain with, no general to convince. They're coming, and nothing will stop them. And their teeth, Joel compares them to lions. Lions were the ultimate predator in the ancient world, the top of the food chain, feared by everyone who ventured into the wilderness. A lion's teeth could crush bone with ease. A lioness's fangs could tear through the toughest hide. That's what this invading force possesses, the ability to consume anything in its path, to devour whatever they encounter without effort or hesitation. The phrase, "against my land," is significant. God calls it his land. This isn't just an attack on Judah or Jerusalem or some political territory. It's an assault on divine property. These invaders, whether you see them as insects or armies or both, have entered territory that belongs to the Lord himself. They're not just destroying crops and trees, they're challenging God's authority over his own inheritance. Joel wants everyone to understand the scale of what's happening. This isn't a minor problem that can be fixed with human effort or clever planning. This is an existential threat, a force that operates with the predatory efficiency of nature's most dangerous animals. When lions hunt, they don't stop until they've fed. When this nation invades, they don't stop until everything is consumed. Verse 7 gets specific about what the invaders have done. It has laid waste my vine and splintered my fig tree. It has stripped off their bark and thrown it down. Their branches are made white. The vine and the fig tree, these weren't just any plants in ancient Israel. They represented everything good about life in the Promised Land: prosperity, peace, security, God's blessing made visible. When Scripture talks about sitting under your own vine and fig tree, it's describing the ultimate picture of safety and abundance. Every man resting in the shade of his own trees, eating his own fruit, at peace with his neighbors. These trees took years to mature. A vine might need 5 years before it produced good grapes. A fig tree could take even longer to reach full productivity. They were investments. They were family legacy. A single vine could produce for generations, passed down from grandfather to father to son. Each harvest was a reminder of continuity, of roots that ran deep. Now they're destroyed. Not just damaged or set back a season, laid waste. The invaders didn't simply eat the fruit or strip the leaves. They went further. They stripped the bark from the trunks. They splintered the wood itself. They threw down the branches with contempt. The trees stand white and naked, exposed and dead. Stripping bark from a tree is a death sentence. The bark protects the living tissue underneath, the cambium layer that transports nutrients from roots to branches. Without it, the tree can't feed itself. It can't heal from wounds. It can't survive even if water returns. What Joel describes isn't a temporary setback that a good season could fix. It's permanent destruction. These trees won't recover. New ones will have to be planted, and it will take years, perhaps decades, before they produce again. The image of white branches is haunting. Normally, wood darkens as it dies and weathers, but freshly stripped wood, exposed to the sun for the first time, turns pale white. It's like looking at bones. The skeleton of what used to be living and green and fruitful, now bleached and lifeless. Every family seeing their fig tree like this would understand they're looking at years of hardship ahead, years of buying fruit from others, years of explaining to their children what used to grow in their own yard. Joel makes it personal by saying, "my vine and my fig tree." He's speaking from God's perspective. These aren't just any trees. They're God's trees, planted in God's land, meant to feed God's people. Their destruction is an offense against heaven itself. In verse 8, Joel shifts the tone with a striking image. Lament like a virgin wearing sackcloth for the bridegroom of her youth. This is one of the most emotionally powerful comparisons in the entire book. Picture a young woman, engaged to be married, full of hope and dreams about her future. She's planned her life around this man. She's imagined their home, their children, growing old together. Then suddenly, without warning, her fiancé dies. Maybe in an accident, maybe in battle, maybe from illness. It doesn't matter how. What matters is that he's gone, and with him, all her dreams. She dresses in sackcloth, the rough, uncomfortable fabric worn during mourning, and grieves for the life she'll never have. She's not mourning what was, but what should have been. That's the level of sorrow Joel is describing. That's the depth of loss he's pointing to. Then verse 9 delivers the reason for such profound grief. The grain offering and the drink offering are cut off from the house of the Lord. The priests mourn, the ministers of the Lord. The temple service has stopped, not by choice, not because of sin or negligence or priestly laziness, but because there's literally nothing to offer. The grain offering required fine flour and oil. The drink offering required wine. All of these came from harvests. Wheat for flour, olives for oil, grapes for wine. With the fields destroyed by locusts, there are no harvests. With no harvests, there are no raw materials. With no raw materials, there are no offerings. With no offerings, the priests can't perform their sacred duties. The priests are mourning because their entire purpose has been taken away. They were called by God to serve in the temple, to facilitate the connection between heaven and earth through sacrifice and offering. They trained for this. They dedicated their lives to this. Their family lines were chosen for this specific role. Now they stand in front of empty altars with nothing in their hands, nothing to burn, nothing to pour out, nothing to present to God on behalf of the people. They want to serve. They want to offer. They want to fulfill their calling. But the locusts have made it impossible. Through no fault of their own, through no failure of devotion or dedication, they're prevented from doing what God commanded them to do. This isn't just about ritual or religious ceremony. The offerings represented the people's gratitude, their repentance, their worship, their connection to the divine. They were the physical expression of a spiritual relationship. When the offerings stop, it's like the conversation between heaven and earth goes silent. The priests feel this absence deeply. They're supposed to be the mediators, the bridge between God and his people, and now they're helpless, unable to function, reduced to mourning what they cannot fix. Joel expands the picture of devastation in verses 10 and 11. The fields are destroyed, the ground mourns, for the grain is destroyed, the wine dries up, the oil fails. Be ashamed, O tillers of the soil, wail, O vine dressers, for the wheat and the barley, because the harvest of the field has perished. The fields are destroyed, not struggling to produce, not yielding less than usual, destroyed completely. The ground itself mourns. Joel personifies the earth as if the soil has feelings, as if the land is in grief over what's happened to it. The ground that should be producing life is instead lamenting death. The grain is destroyed. The wine has dried up. The oil has failed. These three things, grain, wine, and oil, were the foundation of life in ancient Israel. They weren't luxuries, they were necessities. Grain made bread, the staple food that kept everyone alive. Wine provided calories, trade value, and was essential for celebrations and religious ceremonies. Oil was used for cooking, lighting lamps, anointing, and as a base for medicines. Without these three, society couldn't function normally. The farmers are ashamed. Think about what that means. These men worked hard. They prepared the soil properly. They planted at the right time according to generations of agricultural wisdom. They did everything correctly. Everything their fathers taught them, everything experience said would lead to a good harvest. But through no fault of their own, they're staring at total crop failure. Their expertise means nothing. Their effort counts for nothing. The shame isn't about moral failing. It's the crushing embarrassment of being unable to provide, of watching your family go hungry despite your best efforts. The vine dressers wail. These are the specialists who spent their entire lives learning how to cultivate grapes and care for vines. It wasn't simple work. Vines required constant attention, careful pruning, protection from pests and disease. A good vine dresser could make the difference between an average vintage and an exceptional one. Their knowledge was valuable, respected, passed down as carefully as any inheritance. Now that knowledge is useless. The vines are dead. Their skill can't bring them back. The wheat and the barley have both failed. Wheat was the preferred grain, used for the finest bread. Barley was hardier, cheaper, but still essential for feeding both people and animals. When both crops fail simultaneously, you know the disaster is complete. There's no backup. There's no alternative. The harvest of the field has perished. Verse 12 continues the catalogue of destruction. The vine dries up, the fig tree languishes. Pomegranate, palm, and apple, all the trees of the field are dried up, and gladness dries up from the children of man. Every type of fruit tree is listed. Vines, which should be green and laden with clusters of grapes. Figs, which should be swelling with sweet fruit. Pomegranates, with their jewel-like seeds. Palms, providing dates and shade. Apples, crisp and refreshing. Every single tree in the field has dried up. The locust plague didn't discriminate. It didn't skip certain species or spare particular orchards. Everything green became brown. Everything living became dead. Everything fruitful became barren. And then comes the most devastating observation in the entire passage. Gladness itself has dried up from the children of man. Joy is gone. Happiness has evaporated like water in the desert sun. When everything you depend on disappears, when your food is gone and your future is uncertain and your children are hungry, gladness becomes impossible. It's not just that people feel sad. It's that the capacity for joy has been removed from their lives entirely. The people aren't just hungry. They're hopeless. They're not just facing hardship, they're facing a future without light, without celebration, without any reason to smile. Gladness has dried up, just like the vines and the trees and the grain. It's been consumed by the locusts along with everything else. Joel moves from description to prescription in verse 13. Put on sackcloth and lament, O priests. Wail, O ministers of the altar. Go in, pass the night in sackcloth, O ministers of my God, because grain offering and drink offering are withheld from the house of your God. He calls the priests to action. Put on sackcloth, dress in the uncomfortable fabric of mourning. Lament, express your grief audibly and visibly. Wail, don't hold back the depth of your sorrow, and don't just feel bad during the day and go home at night to your comfortable beds. Stay in the temple. Pass the night in sackcloth. Sleep in your mourning clothes if you sleep at all. Let your grief be constant and visible and unrelenting. The priests are supposed to lead the people in worship. Now they must lead them in mourning. They must model the appropriate response to this crisis, showing everyone else how serious the situation has become. The reason is stated clearly. The offerings are withheld from God's house, not forgotten, not neglected, not deliberately held back. Withheld by circumstances beyond anyone's control. God deserves these offerings. He commanded them. He established the system, and the priests are grieving that they can't provide what He requires, even though they desperately want to. Verse 14 escalates the response dramatically. Consecrate a fast, call a solemn assembly, gather the elders and all the inhabitants of the land to the house of the Lord your God, and cry out to the Lord. This isn't individual prayer time anymore. Joel calls for a national sacred gathering. Consecrate a fast. Set apart a specific time when no one eats. Make it official. Make it holy. Not just people choosing to skip a meal, but an organized community-wide commitment to hunger as a form of prayer. Call a solemn assembly. Bring everyone together in the most serious way possible. This isn't a festival. This isn't a celebration. This is a gathering marked by gravity and weight, and the recognition that something must change or everyone will perish. Gather the elders first, the leaders, the people with wisdom and authority, the ones who make decisions, but don't stop there. Gather all the inhabitants of the land. Everyone needs to be there, young and old, rich and poor, influential and insignificant. This crisis affects everyone, so everyone must participate in seeking God's intervention. Where should they gather? At the house of the Lord, the temple, the place where heaven and earth meet, where God has chosen to put his name, where his presence dwells. If you're going to cry out to God, do it at his house. Come to where he is. And what should they do when they gather? Cry out to the Lord, not polite prayers, not quiet, dignified requests. Cry out, raise your voices, shout if necessary. Let God hear the desperation in your hearts, the fear in your voices, the urgency of your need. Verse 15 adds weight and urgency to the call. Alas for the day of the Lord is near, and as destruction from the Almighty it comes. Joel introduces a phrase that will become central to his entire message, the day of the Lord. This isn't just about locusts anymore. This is about divine judgment, about God himself acting in history with power and purpose. The day of the Lord is near, and it's coming like destruction from the Almighty. The locust plague is a sign, a warning, a preview of something even greater and more terrifying. The word Almighty in Hebrew is Shaddai, a name emphasizing God's absolute power and sovereignty. Destruction is coming from the one who has all power, who cannot be resisted, who does whatever he pleases. If the locusts were devastating, what will the full expression of God's judgment look like? Verses 16 through 18 paint a comprehensive picture of agricultural and economic collapse. Is not the food cut off before our eyes, joy and gladness from the house of our God? The seed shrivels under the clods, the storehouses are desolate, the granaries are torn down because the grain has dried up. How the beasts groan! The herds of cattle are perplexed because there is no pasture for them, even the flocks of sheep suffer. The food is gone before their eyes. They're watching it disappear in real time, helpless to stop the process. Joy and gladness have left God's house. The place that should be full of singing and celebration and worship is now silent and empty, marked by grief instead of praise. The seed, which should be sprouting in the ground, sending up green shoots, promising future harvests, shrivels under the clods of dirt. Even the potential for future food is dying. The storehouses, which should be full of grain from previous harvests, stand desolate, empty, useless. The granaries are actually being torn down. Why maintain buildings when there's nothing to store and no prospect of having anything to store? Even the animals suffer under this catastrophe. The cattle groan, a low, mournful sound that expresses their hunger and confusion. They're perplexed, a surprisingly human emotion attributed to beasts. They don't understand why there's no pasture, why the fields that used to provide food are now bare and brown. The sheep suffer too, unable to find grazing land, growing thin and weak. Nobody is exempt from this disaster. Human and animal alike feel the weight of the devastation. The locusts didn't just attack crops, they destroyed the entire ecosystem, eliminating food sources for every living thing. Verse 19 shows Joel himself entering into prayer. To you, O Lord, I call, for fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness, and flame has burned all the trees of the field. Joel doesn't just tell others to pray, he demonstrates it. He calls directly to the Lord, modeling the behavior he's been commanding. And he describes the destruction in terms of fire, whether this is literal fire following the drought or the burning sensation of extreme heat, or a metaphor for the consuming nature of the locusts, the effect is the same. Everything is consumed as if by flames. The pastures of the wilderness are devoured. Even the wild places, the areas outside human cultivation, have been destroyed. The trees of the field are burned. Nothing green remains anywhere. Verse 20 concludes this devastating chapter. Even the beasts of the field pant for you, because the water brooks are dried up, and fire has devoured the pastures of the wilderness. The wild animals are panting, thirsty, exhausted, desperate for relief. The water brooks have dried up completely. Even the wilderness, which should have some water sources, offers nothing. The animals are reaching out to God instinctively, crying out in the only way they know how. Their suffering is a prayer in itself. If even the beasts are seeking the Lord, if even the animals are panting after God in their distress, how much more should his people cry out to him? How much more should those made in his image turn to him in their crisis? The animals show humans what the proper response should be. Not resignation, not despair, but desperate seeking after the only one who can help. Chapter 2 opens with an urgent command in verse 1. Blow a trumpet in Zion, sound an alarm on my holy mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. It is near. A trumpet blast pierces the air. This isn't a call to worship or a signal for celebration. This is an alarm, the kind of sound that makes your blood run cold, that tells you danger is coming and you need to act now. Joel commands someone to blow the shofar, the ram's horn trumpet used in ancient Israel for warnings and emergencies. Where should this alarm sound? In Zion, on God's holy mountain. This is Jerusalem, the city of God, the place where his temple stands. If danger is coming even to the holy mountain, then nowhere is safe. If Zion needs to hear an alarm, then every corner of the land is at risk. The result of this trumpet blast should be trembling, not mild concern, not cautious attention. Trembling. Every inhabitant of the land should shake with fear when they hear this sound, because what's coming is beyond anything they can handle on their own. Why the alarm? Because the day of the Lord is coming, and it's near. Not far off in some distant future, not something that might happen eventually. It's near, it's approaching, it's almost here. The time for casual response has passed. The moment for urgency has arrived. Verse 2 describes this day with vivid imagery. A day of darkness and gloom, a day of clouds and thick darkness. Like blackness there is spread upon the mountains a great and powerful people. Their like has never been before, nor will be again after them through the years of all generations. This is a day of darkness and gloom. The sun doesn't shine, light doesn't break through. Clouds cover everything with thick darkness that you can almost feel pressing down on you. It's spreading across the mountains like blackness itself has physical form, covering the high places, engulfing everything in shadow. And in that darkness comes a great and powerful people, an army, a force. Their like has never been before. Not in any war the elders remember, not in any story their fathers told. And their like will never be again after them, through all the years of all generations. This is unique. This is unprecedented. This is a once-in-history event that will never be repeated. Verse 3 reveals what this army does as it moves. Fire devours before them, and behind them a flame burns. The land is like the Garden of Eden before them, but behind them a desolate wilderness, and nothing escapes them. Picture the scene. Before this army arrives, fire devours everything in its path. It's like a wave of destruction moving ahead of them, preparing the way. Behind them, flames burn continuously. They leave nothing but scorched earth and smoke. The contrast is stark and painful. The land before them is like the Garden of Eden, beautiful, green, full of life and abundance. Everything is growing and healthy and perfect, the way God intended creation to be. Then the army passes through, and behind them lies a desolate wilderness. Everything that was green turns brown. Everything living becomes dead. Everything beautiful becomes ugly, and nothing escapes them. Not a single plant, not a single tree, not a corner of land or a hidden valley. Their destruction is total and complete. Whatever they touch dies. Whatever they pass through ends. Verse 4 describes what these invaders look like. Their appearance is like the appearance of horses, and like war horses they run. They look like horses, powerful, fast, built for warfare. When you see them coming, you think of cavalry, of mounted warriors charging into battle. They have that same sense of strength and speed and unstoppable momentum. Like war horses they run, covering ground with frightening speed, moving as a single force toward their target. Verse 5 adds to the terrifying picture. As with the rumbling of chariots, they leap on the tops of the mountains, like the crackling of a flame of fire devouring the stubble, like a powerful army drawn up for battle. The sound they make is like chariots rumbling across rough ground, a deep, continuous noise that shakes the earth and fills the air with menace. They leap on the tops of the mountains, somehow able to scale heights that should be impossible, moving over terrain that should slow them down. The sound also resembles fire crackling through dry stubble, that sharp, rapid sound of flames consuming dead grass, spreading quickly, impossible to control. And like a powerful army, drawn up for battle, they're organized, ready, positioned for maximum impact. This isn't a disorganized mob. This is a military force, operating with precision and purpose. Verse 6 reveals the effect this army has on people. Before them, peoples are in anguish, all faces grow pale. When people see this army approaching, they don't just feel afraid. They're in anguish, deep, gut-wrenching terror that goes beyond normal fear. All faces grow pale as the blood drains away. The physical reaction to extreme fear shows on every face. Courage disappears, confidence evaporates. What remains is pure dread. Verse 7 describes how this army moves. Like warriors they charge, like soldiers they scale the wall. They march each on his way. They do not swerve from their paths. Like warriors they charge, with the aggression and fearlessness of trained soldiers who know no hesitation. Like soldiers they scale the wall, climbing fortifications that should keep them out, overcoming defenses that should stop them. Every barrier proves useless. Every wall becomes just another obstacle to conquer. They march each on his way. Every individual knows exactly where to go and what to do. They do not swerve from their paths. No distraction pulls them off course. No obstacle makes them change direction. They move forward in straight lines, each one locked onto their objective, utterly focused on their mission. Verse 8 continues describing their perfect coordination. They do not jostle one another. Each marches in his path. They burst through the weapons and are not halted. They do not jostle one another, even though there are countless thousands of them. They never bump into each other or interfere with each other's movement. Each marches in his path with absolute precision. It's like watching a perfectly choreographed dance, except this dance brings destruction instead of beauty. They burst through the weapons, swords, spears, arrows, whatever defenders throw at them makes no difference. They're not halted. They don't slow down. They don't retreat, they don't even pause. The weapons that should stop any army pass through them, or bounce off them, or simply fail to have any effect. Verse 9 shows how they penetrate every defense. They leap upon the city, they run upon the walls, they climb up into the houses, they enter through the windows like a thief. They leap upon the city, attacking from every angle simultaneously. They run upon the walls. The very fortifications built to protect the inhabitants become highways for the invaders. They climb up into the houses. Private homes offer no sanctuary. They enter through the windows like a thief, coming in through openings that seem too small, arriving when you least expect them, taking what isn't theirs. The comparison to a thief is chilling. Thieves come at night, in silence when you're vulnerable. They don't announce themselves. They don't give warning. You wake up and they're already in your house. That's how this army operates. Sudden, invasive, violating every space that should be safe. Verse 10 reveals that creation itself responds to this invasion. The earth quakes before them, the heavens tremble, the sun and the moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. The earth quakes before them, the ground shakes under the weight of their advance. Earthquakes announce their arrival, as if the planet itself is recoiling from what's coming. The heavens tremble. Even the sky responds with fear, shaking at the sight of this terrible army. The sun and the moon are darkened. The two great lights that God placed in the heavens to govern day and night both go dark. The sun stops shining. The moon gives no light. Whether this is literal astronomical darkness or the result of clouds and smoke so thick they block all light, the effect is the same: total darkness in the middle of what should be day. The stars withdraw their shining. Even the distant lights in the night sky pull back, as if hiding from what's happening on earth. The entire created order, earth, heaven, sun, moon, stars, all respond to this invasion with signs of cosmic disturbance. This isn't just an earthly event. This is something that touches the fabric of creation itself. Verse 11 makes clear who's behind this terrifying army. The Lord utters his voice before his army, for his camp is exceedingly great. He who executes his word is powerful. For the day of the Lord is great and very awesome. Who can endure it? The Lord utters his voice before his army. This isn't an enemy attacking God's people despite his protection. This is God himself leading an army in judgment. The voice of the Lord goes before them like thunder, announcing their advance, proclaiming their mission. His camp is exceedingly great. The numbers are beyond counting, beyond imagination. Try to picture an army so vast you can't see where it begins or ends, so numerous that counting them would be impossible. That's God's camp, and he commands every single member of it. He who executes his word is powerful. The one carrying out God's commands has the strength to do whatever is necessary. There's no resistance strong enough to stop them, no defense adequate to hold them back. When God speaks a word of judgment, the power to execute that word is guaranteed. Then comes the question that echoes through the ages. For the day of the Lord is great and very awesome. Who can endure it? Who can stand when God acts in judgment? Who has the strength to survive when the Almighty turns his face toward you in anger? Who can endure the day when heaven and earth shake, when armies beyond number advance with divine authority, when darkness covers the sun and the ground trembles beneath your feet? The question hangs in the air, unanswered, because the answer is obvious. No one can endure it through their own strength. No one can stand in their own power. No one can survive God's judgment by their own merit. The question isn't really asking for information. It's forcing everyone who hears it to face their complete helplessness before God. But then, in the midst of all this terror and darkness and unstoppable judgment, verse 12 offers hope. Yet even now, declares the Lord, return to me with all your heart, with fasting, with weeping, and with mourning. Even now, after everything that's been described, after the army and the darkness and the cosmic upheaval, after the locusts and the devastation and the terror, even now, in this moment when judgment seems certain and destruction inevitable, God offers a way back. Return to me, he says, not to religion, not to rituals, not to better behavior or renewed effort. Return to me, to relationship, to the person of God himself. Come back to the one you've walked away from. How should they return? With all your heart, not half-heartedly, not with divided loyalties, not with one foot in and one foot out. All your heart means complete commitment, total devotion, holding nothing back. With fasting, deliberately choosing hunger to show that you value God more than food, that seeking him matters more than satisfying your physical needs. With weeping, tears that show genuine sorrow, real grief over what you've done and who you've become. With mourning, the kind of deep sadness that comes from recognizing loss, from seeing clearly what sin has cost you. Verse 13 adds a crucial clarification. And rend your hearts and not your garments. Return to the Lord your God, for he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and abounding in steadfast love, and he relents over disaster. Rend your hearts and not your garments. In ancient Israel, tearing your clothes was a sign of grief and repentance. You'd grab your robe at the collar and rip it down the front, exposing your chest, showing everyone that you were in mourning. But God says that's not what He wants. Don't tear your clothes, tear your hearts. What does it mean to rend your heart? It means breaking open your inner self before God. It means letting Him see the real you, the parts you hide from others, the thoughts you're ashamed of, the desires you know are wrong. It means genuine internal change, not just external displays. External actions without internal reality mean nothing to God. You can tear 1,000 garments and it won't matter if your heart remains hard. You can wear sackcloth every day and it won't change anything if your heart stays unchanged. God sees past the performance to what's actually happening inside. Return to the Lord your God. Notice the possessive. He's not just any God. He's your God. The one who made you, who knows you, who has a relationship with you. And here's why you should return, for He is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love. Gracious, He gives good things you don't deserve. Merciful, He doesn't give you the bad things you do deserve. Slow to anger, He doesn't explode at the first offense or punish immediately. He's patient, giving time for change, abounding in steadfast love. His love isn't a trickle or a small stream. It's abundant, overflowing, never-ending. The Hebrew word is hesed, covenant love that remains loyal even when the other person doesn't deserve it. And He relents over disaster. When people genuinely turn back to Him, God changes His mind about the punishment He was planning to send. He's not locked into judgment. He's not forced to punish. He can and will show mercy when hearts truly change. Verse 14 adds a note of hope and possibility. Who knows whether He will not turn and relent and leave a blessing behind Him, a grain offering and a drink offering for the Lord your God? Who knows? Maybe God will turn from His anger. Maybe He will relent from the disaster. Maybe, instead of leaving destruction, He'll leave a blessing, enough harvest to provide grain offerings and drink offerings again. Maybe the priests will have something to offer. Maybe the temple service will resume. Maybe life will return to normal. The who knows isn't uncertainty about God's character. It's humility about deserving His mercy. Nobody can demand that God show mercy. Nobody can claim they deserve another chance. But based on who God is, gracious, merciful, slow to anger, abounding in love, there's hope. There's possibility. There's a reason to return. Verse 15 repeats the command from chapter 1, but now with new urgency and context. Blow the trumpet in Zion, consecrate a fast, call a solemn assembly. Blow the trumpet in Zion, the same alarm that warned of judgment now becomes a call to repentance. The same instrument that announced terror now summons people to hope. Consecrate a fast, set apart a sacred time of going without food to seek God. Call a solemn assembly, gather everyone together in seriousness and gravity. Verse 16 specifies exactly who should come. Gather the people, consecrate the congregation, assemble the elders, gather the children, even nursing infants. Let the bridegroom leave his room and the bride her chamber. Gather the people, all of them, not just the religious ones or the leaders. Consecrate the congregation. Set apart the entire community as holy for this purpose. Assemble the elders, bring the wise ones, the decision makers, those with authority and experience. But don't stop there. Gather the children, not just adults who understand theology, but children who may not fully grasp what's happening. Even nursing infants should be brought. Babies too young to walk or talk, infants still dependent on their mothers for milk. Bring them all. This is radical. Children were often excluded from serious religious gatherings. Infants especially would be considered too young to participate meaningfully. But God says, bring them anyway. This crisis is so serious, this need so urgent, that even babies need to be present. Every single person in the community, from the oldest elder to the newest infant, must be part of this assembly. Let the bridegroom leave his room, and the bride her chamber. This is perhaps the most striking command. A bridegroom in his room with his new bride was exempt from almost every obligation in ancient Israel. Newlyweds were given time to establish their marriage without interference. But not now. Even the groom on his wedding night must leave his bride and come to the assembly. Even the bride must leave her chamber. No exception is permitted. No one gets to stay home. Verse 17 describes where they should go and what they should do. Between the vestibule and the altar, let the priests, the ministers of the Lord, weep and say, "Spare your people, O Lord, and make not your heritage a reproach, a byword among the nations." Why should they say among the peoples, "Where is their God?" Between the vestibule and the altar, this is a specific location in the temple, the space between the entrance hall and the altar of sacrifice. It's a sacred space, a place where priests would stand to perform their duties. Now it becomes a place of intercession. Let the priests weep there. Let the ministers of the Lord cry openly, showing their grief and desperation. And let them pray a specific prayer. Spare your people, O Lord. Notice what they call Israel, your people. Not our nation or this community or the inhabitants of Judah. Your people. They belong to you. They're yours by creation, by covenant, by choice. Spare what belongs to you. Make not your heritage a reproach. Israel is God's inheritance, his special possession. Don't let them become a reproach, something people point to with scorn and mockery. Don't let them become a byword among the nations, a negative example, a cautionary tale, a joke that other countries tell. Why should they say among the peoples, "Where is their God?" This is the heart of the prayer. If Israel is destroyed, if God's people are completely wiped out, if judgment is total and final, what will the surrounding nations say? They'll mock. They'll question. They'll say, "Where is their God? If he was so powerful, why couldn't he save them? If he loved them so much, why did he let them be destroyed?" The priests are appealing to God's reputation, to his glory among the nations. Not because they think they deserve rescue, but because God's name is at stake. If his people perish, his name will be dishonored among those who don't know him. The prayer is essentially, "Save us not because we deserve it, but because your name deserves to be honored. Save us so the nations will know you are real, you are powerful, you are faithful to your people." Everything changes in verse 18 of chapter 2. Then the Lord became jealous for his land and had pity on his people. After all the devastation, after all the terror, after all the darkness and judgment, something shifts in God's heart. He becomes jealous for his land, not jealous in the petty human sense, but with a fierce, protective love. This is his land. These are his people, and he will not let them be destroyed or mocked forever. He had pity on his people. The Hebrew word suggests deep compassion, the kind of feeling a parent has for a suffering child. God looks at his people in their misery and feels moved to act on their behalf. Their prayers reached him, their repentance mattered, their tears were not ignored. Verse 19 shows God's immediate response. The Lord answered and said to his people, "Behold, I am sending to you grain, wine, and oil, and you will be satisfied with them, and I will no more make you a reproach among the nations." God answers. He doesn't leave them wondering. He doesn't make them wait in uncertainty. He speaks directly to his people with a promise. "Behold, pay attention to what I'm about to do. I am sending to you grain, wine, and oil." Remember these three? They were destroyed by the locusts. They disappeared completely. The fields were bare, the vines were dead, the olive trees were stripped. But now God promises to send them back, not just a little, enough that you will be satisfied, enough to fill your stomachs and your storehouses, enough to restore what was lost. And I will no more make you a reproach among the nations. The mockery will stop. The shame will end. Other nations won't point at Israel and laugh anymore. God's reputation and Israel's dignity will both be restored. Verse 20 gets specific about one particular enemy. I will remove the northerner far from you and drive him into a parched and desolate land, his vanguard into the eastern sea and his rear guard into the western sea. His stench and foul smell will rise, for he has done great things. The northerner, this mysterious invader, whether understood as locusts or a foreign army or both, will be removed far away. God will drive him into a parched and desolate land, splitting the army in two. The front part goes into the eastern sea, the Dead Sea. The rear part goes into the western sea, the Mediterranean. The entire force is scattered and destroyed. His stench and foul smell will rise. The bodies of dead locusts or dead soldiers will rot, creating a terrible odor that reminds everyone of what happened. Why does God destroy them so completely? Because he has done great things, great terrible things, great destructive things. The damage was enormous, and the punishment matches the crime. Verse 21 shifts to a direct command to the land itself. Fear not, O land. Be glad and rejoice, for the Lord has done great things. The land is personified, spoken to, as if it has ears to hear and a heart to feel. Fear not, don't be afraid anymore. The danger has passed, the threat is removed. Be glad and rejoice. Emotions that seemed impossible during the devastation now become commands. Choose joy, embrace gladness. Why? Because the Lord has done great things. The same phrase used for the destroyer's actions is now used for God's restoration. The enemy did great things of destruction. God does great things of salvation. One set of great things cancels out the other and goes far beyond. Verse 22 continues speaking to creation. Fear not, you beasts of the field, for the pastures of the wilderness are green. The tree bears its fruit. The fig tree and vine give their full yield. The animals are addressed directly. Fear not, you beasts of the field. You were suffering, groaning, panting for water. You couldn't find food. You didn't understand what was happening. But now you can stop being afraid. The pastures of the wilderness are green again. Grass is growing. Food is available. You won't starve anymore. The tree bears its fruit. The trees that were stripped and splintered are producing again. The fig tree and vine give their full yield. Not a partial recovery, not a struggling comeback, but full yield. Maximum production, abundant harvest. Everything is not just surviving but thriving. Verse 23 turns to the people. Be glad, O children of Zion, and rejoice in the Lord your God, for he has given the early rain for your vindication. He has poured down for you abundant rain, the early and the latter rain as before. Be glad, O children of Zion. This is addressed to the people of Jerusalem, to those who belong to God's holy city. Rejoice in the Lord your God, not just in the restoration itself, but in the one who restored. Not just in the rain, but in the God who sends rain. Your joy should be in him. Why rejoice? Because he has given the early rain for your vindication. The early rain was crucial in ancient Israel. It came in autumn, softening the ground so seeds could be planted. Without it, farming couldn't begin. God sends it now as vindication, as proof that he has turned back to his people, as evidence that their repentance was accepted. He has poured down for you abundant rain, not a drizzle, not scattered showers. Abundant rain, heavy, soaking, more than enough. The early and the latter rain as before. The early rain in autumn, the latter rain in spring before harvest. Both seasons of rain restored to their proper times and proper amounts, just like it was before the disaster. Verse 24 describes the result. The threshing floors shall be full of grain, the vats shall overflow with wine and oil. The threshing floors, the places where grain is separated from chaff after harvest, will be full, not partially filled, not adequately supplied. Full, completely full of grain, with piles so large there's barely room for the workers. The vats shall overflow with wine and oil. Vats are the large containers where crushed grapes are collected, where pressed olives yield their oil. They're designed to hold a lot. But the harvest will be so abundant that even these large containers overflow. There's more than they can contain. Excess becomes the new normal. Verse 25 makes an incredible promise. I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten, the hopper, the destroyer, and the cutter, my great army, which I sent among you. I will restore to you the years, not just the crops, not just this season's harvest, the years, plural, multiple years of loss and devastation. Every year the locust destroyed, God will somehow give back. Time itself will be redeemed. Lost seasons will be recovered. That the swarming locust has eaten, the hopper, the destroyer, and the cutter. All 4 types of locusts mentioned back in chapter 1 are listed again. Every wave of destruction is acknowledged. Every phase of devastation is remembered. God isn't ignoring what happened or pretending it wasn't so bad. He sees the full extent of the damage. My great army, which I sent among you, God takes responsibility. These weren't random natural disasters beyond his control. They were his army, sent by him, carrying out his judgment. But now the same God who sent judgment promises restoration that goes beyond anything they lost. How do you restore years? How do you give back time? Through abundance so great it makes up for every lack. Through harvests so large they equal multiple normal years. Through blessing so intense it feels like you're living several good years compressed into one. Verse 26 continues, You shall eat in plenty and be satisfied, and praise the name of the Lord your God, who has dealt wondrously with you, and my people shall never again be put to shame. You shall eat in plenty and be satisfied. Remember the hunger during the locust plague, gone. Remember the empty stomachs and worried faces, replaced with satisfaction. You'll eat until you're full, and there will still be more. Plenty becomes the defining characteristic of life after restoration. And praise the name of the Lord your God, who has dealt wondrously with you. When you're full and satisfied and blessed, don't forget who did this. Praise his name. Acknowledge his work. Tell everyone about the wonders he performed. The God who dealt wondrously in judgment now deals wondrously in restoration, and my people shall never again be put to shame. This promise appears twice in this section, emphasizing its importance. The shame is over. The reproach is finished. The humiliation ends. From now on, God's people will stand with dignity because their God has proven faithful. Verse 27 makes a profound declaration. You shall know that I am in the midst of Israel, and that I am the Lord your God, and there is none else. And my people shall never again be put to shame. You shall know. This isn't just intellectual understanding. This is experiential knowledge, the kind that comes from seeing and touching and living through something. You shall know that I am in the midst of Israel. God isn't distant. He isn't watching from far away. He's in the midst, right in the center, present among his people, living with them. And that I am the Lord your God, the covenant name, the personal name, Yahweh. Not just a God, but the Lord. Not just any Lord, but your God. The relationship is specific and personal, and there is none else. He's unique. No other God compares. No other power matters. He alone is God. The promise of no more shame is repeated, and my people shall never again be put to shame. Repetition in Hebrew poetry emphasizes importance. This matters deeply to God, that his people would live without shame, that their dignity would be secure, that their reputation would be protected. Verse 28 of chapter 2 introduces something completely new. And it shall come to pass afterward that I will pour out my spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. And it shall come to pass afterward, after the restoration, after the rain returns, after the harvests are abundant, after shame is removed, then something else happens, something even more remarkable than physical restoration. I will pour out my spirit on all flesh, not just on priests, not just on prophets, not just on kings or special religious people. On all flesh, everyone, regardless of position or status or background. God's Spirit, which had previously been given selectively to specific individuals for specific tasks, will now be poured out like water, abundantly and universally. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Both genders will speak God's words. This breaks the normal pattern where prophets were almost always men. Now daughters will prophesy alongside sons, speaking divine truth with divine authority. Your old men shall dream dreams, and your young men shall see visions. Age won't matter. Old men, who in that culture were respected for wisdom, but often seen as past their prime for spiritual experiences, will dream dreams, receiving revelation from God during sleep. Young men, full of energy, but often dismissed as inexperienced, will see visions, receiving revelation while awake. Verse 29 continues this revolutionary promise, even on the male and female servants. In those days I will pour out my spirit, even on the male and female servants, even on slaves, even on those at the bottom of the social ladder, those with no status or power or influence. In those days I will pour out my spirit on them too. Social class doesn't limit God's spirit. Economic status doesn't determine spiritual access. Everyone, from the highest to the lowest, receives the same outpouring. This is radical. This is unprecedented. This changes everything about how people relate to God and how they relate to each other. When the Spirit is on everyone, old hierarchies break down. When servants prophesy like masters, when daughters speak like sons, when young and old both receive visions and dreams, society transforms. Verse 30 shifts to future warning. And I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. God will show wonders, supernatural signs that grab attention and communicate divine messages in the heavens, in the sky above, on the earth, on the ground below. Both realms will display these signs, blood and fire and columns of smoke. Blood suggests violence and death. Fire speaks of judgment and destruction. Columns of smoke rising high into the air create visible markers that everyone can see from miles away. These aren't subtle hints. These are dramatic, unmistakable signs that something significant is happening. Verse 31 describes cosmic changes. The sun shall be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. The sun shall be turned to darkness. The source of light and life goes dark, creating terror and confusion. The moon to blood, appearing red, perhaps from smoke or atmospheric conditions, looking like it's covered in blood. These cosmic signs happen before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes. They're warnings, advance notices that the final day of judgment is approaching. Verse 32 offers hope in the midst of these terrifying signs. And it shall come to pass that everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be those who escape, as the Lord has said, and among the survivors shall be those whom the Lord calls. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Not everyone who lives perfectly, not everyone who never makes mistakes, everyone who calls, who cries out, who seeks, who asks for help. Calling on God's name becomes the dividing line between salvation and destruction. For in Mount Zion and in Jerusalem there shall be those who escape. Even during judgment there will be survivors. God always preserves a remnant, always saves some, always ensures that his purposes continue. As the Lord has said, this is according to divine promise, not human achievement. and among the survivors shall be those whom the Lord calls. There's a mystery here. People call on God's name, and God calls people to himself. Both divine calling and human response play a role. The survivors are those God chooses and those who choose God. Chapter 3 begins with a time marker in verse 1. For behold, in those days and at that time, when I restore the fortunes of Judah and Jerusalem, I will gather all the nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat. And I will enter into judgment with them there, on behalf of my people and my heritage Israel, because they have scattered them among the nations and have divided up my land. In those days and at that time, when restoration happens, when the Spirit is poured out, God will gather all the nations to the valley of Jehoshaphat, which means Yahweh judges. I will enter into judgment with them there. God himself becomes the judge, acting on behalf of my people and my heritage Israel. Why? Because they scattered God's people among the nations and divided up his land. Verse 3 gives specific charges. And have cast lots for my people, and have traded a boy for a prostitute, and have sold a girl for wine and have drunk it. They gambled with human lives, traded children for pleasure and alcohol, treating God's people like worthless objects. Verses 4 through 6 address specific regions. What are you to me, O Tyre and Sidon, and all the regions of Philistia? Are you paying me back for something? If you are paying me back, I will return your payment on your own head swiftly and speedily. For you have taken my silver and my gold, and have carried my rich treasures into your temples. You have sold the people of Judah and Jerusalem to the Greeks in order to remove them far from their own border. God confronts the coastal nations who stole his treasures, placed them in false temples, and sold his people as slaves to distant lands. Verses 7 and 8 promise reversal. Behold, I will stir them up from the place to which you have sold them, and I will return your payment on your own head. I will sell your sons and your daughters into the hand of the people of Judah, and they will sell them to the Sabeans, to a nation far away, for the Lord has spoken. What they did to others comes back to them completely. Verse 9 issues a challenge. Proclaim this among the nations, consecrate for war, stir up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. God tells the nations to prepare for battle, to gather their strongest warriors. Verse 10 gives ironic instructions. Beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am a warrior. Turn farming tools into weapons. Even the weak should claim to be fighters. God wants everyone there to demonstrate how powerless human military might is against him. Verses 11 and 12 continue. Hasten and come, all you surrounding nations, and gather yourselves there. Bring down your warriors, O Lord. Let the nations stir themselves up and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there I will sit to judge all the surrounding nations. God will be seated as judge, while every nation stands before him. Verse 13 uses harvest imagery. Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Go in, tread, for the winepress is full. The vats overflow, for their evil is great. Judgment day has arrived. The harvest of human evil is ready to be reaped like grapes crushed in a winepress. Verse 14 paints the scene. Multitudes, multitudes, in the valley of decision. For the day of the Lord is near in the valley of decision. Countless people gather where God will pronounce his verdict. Verse 15 repeats the cosmic signs. The sun and the moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. Heaven responds as judgment falls. Verse 16 contrasts terror and safety. The Lord roars from Zion and utters his voice from Jerusalem, and the heavens and the earth quake. But the Lord is a refuge to his people, a stronghold to the people of Israel. God's voice terrifies enemies, but protects his own. Verse 17 secures Jerusalem. So you shall know that I am the Lord your God, who dwells in Zion, my holy mountain. And Jerusalem shall be holy, and strangers shall never again pass through it. the city becomes permanently protected. Verse 18 describes abundant blessing. And in that day the mountains shall drip sweet wine, and the hills shall flow with milk, and all the stream beds of Judah shall flow with water, and a fountain shall come forth from the house of the Lord, and water the valley of Shittim. Wine flows from mountains, milk from hills, water from everywhere, and a fountain springs from God's temple. Verse 19 pronounces judgment. Egypt shall become a desolation, and Edom a desolate wilderness, for the violence done to the people of Judah, because they have shed innocent blood in their land. Nations that harmed God's people become wastelands. Verse 20 contrasts Judah's future. But Judah shall be inhabited forever, and Jerusalem to all generations. While enemies fall, God's people endure eternally. Verse 21 concludes, I will avenge their blood. Blood I have not avenged, for the Lord dwells in Zion. God will settle every account, address every injustice. The book ends with the ultimate reality. The Lord dwells in Zion. Because God lives among his people, justice will be done, safety is guaranteed, and heaven touches earth. If this journey through Joel opened your eyes to something new, if you saw this ancient prophecy in a way you've never seen before, then subscribe to this channel so you won't miss our next biblical deep dive. Hit that notification bell to stay updated with more stories that bring Scripture to life in fresh, compelling ways. And don't keep this to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Joel's message. Whether they're facing their own devastation or searching for hope in dark times, Joel's words speak powerfully to every generation. Share it with your Bible study group, your friends, your family. Let's spread these ancient truths together. Thank you for watching. Until next time, may you know that the Lord dwells among his people.